Pablo was shot 3 times, once in the back of the leg, once in the butt, and the kill shot was in his ear.
This is an urgent broadcast. It's Mad That with Harry Robinson and Carl Riegler.
Hello and welcome to Mad That, brought to you by Have Word Studios. I'm Harry Robinson.
I'm Carl Riegler.
And if you like what we're doing here, make sure to like, subscribe.
Do all that. Like, subscribe, comment. This is Series 1. In Series 2, if you've got an idea of a guest who you know, please drop it below. We will listen. We will reach out to them. So, yeah.
And we can get in touch with anyone, as we've
Anybody.
famously proven.
I mean, he's proved, you see the guests in this season, the people he's got. Next, what are we getting next? We're going to go for the Queen.
The Queen, the Pope.
The Pope, yeah.
King Henry VIII.
King Henry VIII.
He's coming on season 3.
That's the first 3 episodes. So what you want to see after that, comment below. And go and check our socials out. Go and check Have a Word socials out. And yeah, if you like what we're doing, tell us. We're narcissists. We like to know.
We're going to jump into the intro, which is going to be recorded immediately after we finish talking to today's guest.
Yes.
So just enjoy that. Understand that that's the context for it. And just dive right into it. Hope you enjoy.
Nice one.
Oh, I have such deep love for those guys. It's like
This is the episode with Javier Peña and Steve Murphy, the 2 guys who led the task force that killed Pablo Escobar and that Narcos is based on, kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, they're portrayed in not.
Yeah. I mean, my man was portrayed by Pedro Pascal.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And you know, Steve Murphy was portrayed by the guy who fought Wolverine in Logan.
Yeah.
So like,
and they're 2 just unassuming guys, obviously ex cops, and they're just so cool. And
they're like, because they're older, like they look like 2 granddads.
Yeah, just
and
2
like,
of the coolest granddads ever. Who've just lived this insane life.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, we'll talk about, obviously we'll go into depth about Pablo Escobar. If you don't know who Pablo Escobar is, he's the biggest drug trafficker in history.
Was it 90s? Late 80s?
Late 80s. I mean, throughout the 80s, really, he was kind of working. And throughout the 80s, and then was finally kind of captured in the 90s.
So if you had cocaine, or your parents had cocaine in the 80s or 90s, it's probably made by him.
Yeah, 80% of the world's cocaine.
Yeah.
And at one point, he was the 7th richest person in the world.
Listed by Forbes. Can you imagine Forbes putting a criminal in their list now?
I know, but he like, it's the equivalent, we talk about it later on, it's the equivalent to about $70 billion that he had at one point.
Just from the level.
I mean, there is a species of hippo. I'm not sure if you know this. There's a species of hippo in Colombia that has like Escobar in like the Latin name of it, because he bought hippos for his daughter. Hippos don't like exist in Colombia, and they escaped when he was sent to his own prison and bred. And now Colombia has hippos.
My man invented hippos in Colombia. That's how heavy he was.
Not
heavy. Let's say notorious.
Yeah. Well, I think what this podcast will do really well is, I mean, obviously it tells the story in these amazing stories that Steve and Javier have, but also the fact that kind of how serious and sinister Pablo Escobar was as a character. I
think the myth of Pablo Escobar is so strong within our generation, and I think kind of Narcos might have exacerbated that in a weird way. Like, as you said, people wear his merch, people think he's cool, people use his gifts, people use pictures of him. Steve and Javier show the real Pablo Escobar, and you know, he wasn't a good guy.
And they knew the real Pablo Escobar in a weird,
I mean, he said, I mean, you'll see his, you know, what he said about this, but Steve held Pablo Escobar's dead body when he'd just been murdered.
These guys are the real deal. And from a personal point of view, I touched on it right at the end, but I mean, I spoke to these lads, like 70-year-old men.
These gentlemen.
About 5-6 years ago. And it's one of those things where, when I was first starting out in kind of journalism, it's one of those things where I feel very privileged that I get to revisit it with better kind of interviewing, I guess.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially at points that they're so used to kind of talking, I feel like we've come on so much as interviewers, even just over this little series.
Totally, yeah.
Like, you can see like when kind of the speaking persona fades away quite early on, and they're just
they're just them.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because they're professionals. They go around the world telling their story. So for them to give us their time's insane for starters. But yeah, you're right. At the start, it was like and then it was just two guys telling their story of their life. I noticed that as well. It kind of, they became more real rather than Steve and Javier. They became just, these two guys who tell an insane story.
Who also caught the most dangerous man on the planet at the time.
Who caught, one of the most infamous men in modern history. In any history. Yeah.
So we really hope you enjoy. We're getting to the end of the Mad That season now. And it's been unbelievable. Like it's surpassed every expectation I had from us. I mean, I had high expectations anyway, but the level of what we've done and the people that we've got on and the people who we've talked to and how we've developed as kind of interviewers.
Can you imagine how sick Series 2 is going to be? If we've done this in Series 1, I mean, this is 95% Harry. His work's been insane. Can you imagine how good Series 2 is going to be? Genuinely.
So enjoy with our mates, Steve and Javi.
The boys now.
The boys.
We've got some boss mates now, by the way. I mean, there's another one coming up who you're going to see, but we've got some boss mates now.
It's a mad... For your stag do, just invite them all.
Wow. It'd be unbelievable.
Enjoy. So how are you lads then? Are you all good?
We're good. Who's your partner there?
So this is
I'm
Carl.
Nice to meet you. Sorry, I've been running around trying to get things sorted, but we're ready now. Where are you both based? Where are we talking to?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
No, I'm in Orlando, Florida.
We'll jump straight into it then. So a question that we like to ask when we first start, it's a bit different now because we're speaking to two people, but is kind of, obviously you two are known as the kind of DEA Narcos, or you're defined a lot of the time by people who know you back because of the hunt for Pablo Escobar and stuff like that. I guess individually, maybe starting with you, Steve, first. Who is Steve Murphy? And then for you, Javier, who is Javier Peña?
Steve Murphy is a redneck hillbilly who was born in Tennessee and grew up in West Virginia. That became a police officer in 1975. Was in law enforcement for 38 years. I was a uniformed police officer for 6 years. I was a railroad police officer for almost 6 years. And then my last 26 years, I worked as a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Got to experience things all around the world. One of the most significant was after graduating from the academy, I spent 4 years in Miami, Florida with DEA, getting there in 1987, and that's when it was still the Wild West down there. It was very eye-opening for a country boy to go to the big city, and extremely naive when I got there, but got to experience things that just, you see on television that they make TV shows out of. And then from there, went to Bogota, Colombia for 3 years. And of course, that's where I met my partner, Javier Peña, and was assigned to work as one of the two case agents on bringing down the Medellin cartel. So retired in 2013 from law enforcement. That's when we got involved with the Netflix series Narcos. Did a couple of odd jobs right after retirement just because I got bored. Did some background investigations, worked on a couple of contract projects. But then it kind of led to our speaking business. And when I say our, that's Javier and I. And we're finishing up now our 9th year of traveling around the world, telling this true story about Pablo Escobar. And along the way, there have been a lot of other projects, a lot of TV projects, documentaries. One project that we're really proud of is the Lost Clipper, which is a whole nother, that's a whole different episode. It's a cold case file involving the disappearance of 15 Americans from 1938. But if you want to find more about that, you can go to thelostclipper.com. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. That's a big nutshell. Thank you.
What about you, Javier?
Yep, Javier Peña. I'm from South Texas, grew up around the border area of Mexico and Texas, and became a deputy sheriff at the sheriff's office in Laredo, Texas in 1977. Then worked on my degree, my college degree. So I was working, I had the night shift, went to college during the day, got my degree, then wanted something better, more money basically. But so I applied for the feds, and I got selected in 1984. And my first duty station was Austin, Texas, which was the beginning of the music industry. I know a lot of people have heard, South by Southwest. It was a great time to be there. I got to see George Strait starting off, and it was a great time. And it was the beginning of methamphetamine in Austin, so I got involved in a lot of how the manufacture of methamphetamine, how that works. So 4 years, and I was transferred, ended up in Colombia in 1988, and was assigned the Pablo Escobar investigation, was there from 88, and then I was there during the surrender, when he went to his custom built prison, then the escape, and that's when Steve joined me. We call it the second war, the second search. Then after Colombia '94, I went to Puerto Rico, got promoted. In Puerto Rico, went back to our headquarters in Washington, then went back to Colombia, San Antonio. Then my trajectory, I was promoted to the agent in charge of San Francisco Field Division, then agent in charge of Puerto Rico. Ended up in Houston, Texas, until my retirement in 2014. That's when Netflix started calling, and like Steve said, led us to our speaking business, which traveled the world, something I did not expect. And here we are talking to you guys.
It's a lengthy story for the
some
both.
life. So you say you were partnered up in 87, 88 in Colombia. How does it feel to be partnered up with somebody? What's the process? How does your life change when you become a partner of another police officer? What does that look like? Steve, do you want to go first?
Well, Javier got to Colombia in 1988. I got there in 1991. In fact, I reported to the embassy the same week that Pablo surrendered in June of 1991. But, to go overseas with DEA, they don't assign you. You have to volunteer to go overseas. And, 4 years in Miami had been very exciting here. My partner in 1989 at that time, Kevin Stevens, we were doing a deal and he was shot during the deal. He survived. Took him about a year to recuperate, but our informant was killed. He was shot right in the throat and never made it to the hospital. The level of narcotics investigations that DEA is involved with, and here's an example. So I'd been a cop for 12 years when I joined DEA. The most powder cocaine I'd ever seen at one time was 2 ounces, a baggie about this big. The first case I got to work on with a senior partner, I'm the new guy, a partner named Gene Frankar. He'd been working on an investigation for a couple of years. And it was, the focus of the investigation was to prove that the Castro brothers were allowing Cuba to be used as a transshipment point for cocaine coming from Colombia through Cuba into South Florida. So my first undercover trip, we went on a 53-foot Hatteras sport fisherman yacht from Fort Lauderdale to the Turks and Caicos Islands. A plane flew in from Cuba, dropped off 400 kilos of cocaine, and then flew back to Cuba. So I went from 2 ounces to 880 pounds of cocaine. And I got to tell you, I was addicted to cocaine at that point, just in a different way, right?
What about you, Javier, in terms of?
Yeah, and that's really basically sort of the same. I mean, I was dealing with lower class trafficker, lower violators. I remember our undercover buys were, ounces of heroin. There was a lot more methamphetamine. So you're dealing with basically the lower distribution cell heads on the streets in Austin, Texas. Like I said, and I always remember it was the start of methamphetamine, and we were still seeing, I don't know if you remember, LSD on the streets. There was a lot of blotter acid being sold, especially in Austin, Texas. So got involved with that. But I always want to know or see how the bigger traffickers work, get into the major leagues. So that's why I applied. And basically there was a mistake. I applied for Mexico and they gave me Colombia. So it was a mistake for me to go to Colombia. But, once they asked me, hey, do you want to rescind it? I said, nah, I'll go to Colombia. Like I said, did not know where Colombia was. Had to go look it up. And that was, I guess trajectory was all based on an error. Instead of going to Mexico, and ended up in Colombia. Yep. And you know what? And at that time in Colombia, it was a senior agent I was assigned to, and she had the Pablo Escobar investigation. So they assigned me to work with her, start learning the case, and then all of a sudden, uh, she uh, she was getting married. So she left real quick, and I was like the main case agent on Pablo Escobar. As soon as I get there, my first partner was a guy by the name of Gary Sheridan, very intelligent, very knowledgeable. And then, but I learned right away that I wasn't dealing with the lower class traffickers. We're dealing with the major league traffickers now.
With you getting there first, Javier, I guess this also goes for you, Steve, when you arrived. What did you know about Pablo Escobar when you were assigned to him? Was there any knowledge at all kind of coming into Colombia, or did you have to kind of learn more about the man, I guess?
Yeah, I'll go first. As for me, I had no knowledge because I was in Texas. I mean, I was dealing with the Mexican traffickers. I knew who all the major traffickers, and you had heard of Pablo Escobar, but in Texas, we were not dealing with the Colombian cocaine like Steve was in Miami. So mine was a shock. I had heard of him, but basically when I get there to Colombia, they told me, hey, start learning it. And I started basically studying Pablo Escobar, who he was, and was working. Like I said, we had an informal task force. So my trips to Medellin were basically, I'd spend the night there, 2 nights, and come back to the embassy. Not like the second time where Steve and I lived with the Colombian National Police night and day. But when you started learning this trafficker, the name was out there, but it wasn't, I guess, until the mid to late 80s when all the start of narco terrorism started occurring, and the name responsible for the narco terrorism was Pablo Escobar. So that's when we started basically doing, full court press, learning and trying to go after Pablo Escobar. So it was a different type of trafficker, not like the ones I was dealing with in Austin, Texas.
But for me, working in Miami, I mean, all the cases were huge. They were multi-hundred kilogram quantities of cocaine. I'd never seen things like that before. And the Medellin cartel, Pablo Escobar, controls South Florida. So all the cocaine coming in was from the Medellin cartel. You knew who was sending it, but the level of cases that we were working on were at a much lower level. I never got a case high enough to indict Pablo Escobar, although some of the other agents in Miami did, as well as other parts of the United States. I remember after my partner was shot in 1989, they sent me over to the Bahamas for 3 months to kind of get me out of the Miami area and so forth. And we were working with the Bahamian National Police and the U.S. Coast Guard and U.S. Army, flying around patrols, looking for anything drug-related out in the Caribbean Ocean or the seas there. And we got a call from the embassy in Nassau. I was in Freeport. The Nassau embassy called the DEA office and said, hey, get over to Treasure Key. We think that there's a jet over there that came in from Mexico. And the intelligence is that Pablo Escobar might have been on that jet. And, of course, the bosses asked me, do you know who Pablo is? And I said, yeah. And they said, do you have a picture of him? Well, at that time, I was reading the book, The Kings of Cocaine. And there was a picture of Pablo in the book. So the boss is telling me, hey, take that book with you for identification purposes. So we flew over to Treasure Key. We scrambled the helicopters out and flew over. We found the jet. We actually blocked the runway because it was preparing to take off. And, long story short, Pablo, if he was there, we never found him. And we could never find anybody that would admit that they saw him there. But it's just, that's kind of the persona that he had developed at that time as being the world's largest producer of cocaine, the largest distributor of cocaine, a guy who eventually became responsible for 80% of the world's cocaine. Not to mention, he worked himself to where he became the world's first narco-terrorist.
Can you remember the first time that you realized quite how dangerous he was? Because obviously you knew he was a a big time trafficker. Can you remember when the first time you were like, oh, this guy, he's dangerous and our lives are constantly on the line here? Can you remember the first time?
Yeah, basically, my first recollection of how dangerous Pablo Escobar was when his sicarios, the assassins, a sicario, uh, it basically, that first search of Pablo Escobar in Medellin, our cops would go out and, there was always a firefight. There was always a shootout. And I remember one of the young sergeants in Medellin, he was from Bogota, on a raid, ends up getting shot in the face. And I wasn't there, I was back at the base, and I remember when the guys came back, he said, no, I remember they were telling the colonel, he said, he's gonna make it. He was talking, he was in good spirit. And then after an hour, he died. And then, it was a common theme, the shootouts with Pablo Escobar's sicarios. And then the real, like I said, the real start of narco terrorism were, basically when he started initiating car bombs, putting car bombs at restaurants, at parks, at, shopping malls. That's when actually the war on Pablo Escobar and the war on Colombia, started, and that was the initiation of narco terrorism. And if you look at the significant narco terrorism, you look at the Avianca airline bombing, which obviously was a bomb planted by Pablo Escobar on a commercial airline. I think it was 109 innocent people were killed. So then again, I just remember, like I said, the sicarios, the car bombs, the Avianca bombing. Then he put another bomb at the DOS building, which was like the local FBI office in Colombia. Another hundreds plus people were killed. But what stands out in my mind is August 18, 1989, the killing of Presidential Luis Carlos Galan. Once he killed Luis Carlos Galan, and the significance of that was that Galan was going to be the next president of Colombia. So he hated Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar hated Galan. And like I said, he was campaigning for extradition, which, for your audience to know that the fight on Pablo Escobar was based on extradition. Basically, Pablo did not want to get extradited to the United States. And but the killing of the presidential Luis Carlos Galan really started that anger movement in Colombia against Pablo Escobar, and that's when for your history buffs, the old president Virgilio Barco Vargas declared war on Pablo Escobar. This was in 1989, and that's what led to the famous search block which we call now Bloque de Búsqueda started to form, and that's when Colombia basically said, we're going to concentrate all our efforts, all our assets in going after Pablo Escobar.
When you say sicarios as well, it's worth giving context about the fact that the sicarios were kind of Pablo Escobar's, I guess, guards or the people who, his goons, the people who would kind of do his bidding, but they were all oftentimes like late teens, early 20s, and they didn't have huge life expectancy. I remember reading about you, Javier, speaking specifically to a sicario who said that in Manhunters, in your book, saying that the sicario is willing to die for Pablo Escobar because the Pablo Escobar's money had gotten his mother out of the slums, so he was kind of almost indebted. How important do you think this kind of process of making people indebted to Pablo Escobar and willing to give their lives for him, how dangerous, I guess, was that for the enforcement officers who were chasing down Pablo Escobar?
And that's a great point you bring up because, like I said, in the United States, we did not know what a Sicario was. I mean, you hear about it, but you really, what's a Sicario, right? And yeah, that interview I did, and he was a young, I hate to call him a kid, I call him a thug, 15 years old, and and it's that life of it's always been intriguing to me. But this thug was grew up on the streets. He was cardboard boxes, taking care of his mother, and Pablo Escobar saved their life by buying them a house, giving them money. And when he told me that what his life belonged to Pablo Escobar, that he would die and kill for him, it takes on a different factor, takes on a different persona in that, what, if he did that with this young kid, imagine all the other young thugs around Medellin, all of them wanted to work for Pablo Escobar. They wanted to be heroes in Pablo's eyes. They worshipped him, and they would do anything that, like you say, it was an honor basically for them to be hired by Pablo Escobar. And there was also proven stories where Pablo used to go recruit, and it was an old Catholic church in Medellin, and there'd be 300-400 of these young thugs all waiting for him. And you talked about, what, and what, we hate to say it, but he was very charismatic. He had that special charisma where, like I said, he'd hug them, kiss them, give them money, and everybody, is all around him. And please, Pablo, I'll work for you and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And that's something that we were dealing against, that we never had experience in dealing with sicarios. So then all of a sudden you got this, 500 thugs all working for Pablo, willing to do anything he asked them to do. So that's a different factor. And again, that was part of his terrorism.
How kind of dangerous, and maybe starting with you, Steve, how dangerous was that kind of, or how prominent maybe was that kind of cult of personality of Pablo Escobar? Especially, I mean, he tried to paint himself as this kind of, is it the Paisa Robin Hood character of giving all this money to kind of the slums of Medellin. How prominent was that cult of personality of Escobar in Colombia, and how did that impact, I guess, the hunt for him?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about this myth of being a Robin Hood, because we like to dispel that myth with the truth every opportunity we get. The fact is that Pablo did build housing for people that lived on the edge of a trash dump in Medellin. And he did provide food, and he did build medical clinics and sports fields, and he gave away money. So he did do a lot of things, but nothing comes free. Remember the old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Well, as his sicarios are being killed in firefights with the Colombian military, Colombian police, with other drug organizations, specifically the Cali cartel, and he needs new sicarios, where do you think he would go to recruit those new sicarios? He'd go back into those slums where he had given these people housing and food and so forth. And you look at it, if your mom was living on a trash, living in cardboard boxes or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden she has a roof over her head, she has running water, she has electricity, she has a lock on her door, which gives her a sense of security, you might feel some loyalty to the person that did that. And that's what happened. But Pablo knew that. So what he did is rather than being a Robin Hood, we refer to him as a master manipulator, because he manipulated all these young people. Well, you took care of my mom. Okay, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to kill for you. I'm even willing to die for you. I mean, there's no Robin Hood in this whatsoever. It's all about him. He used those poor people. You hate to say that I don't want to say that they weren't intelligent enough to realize the risky situation that they were putting themselves in, but hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of these people gave their lives for Pablo Escobar. Now, were they getting a portion of all the drug proceeds, all the monies that he's earning? Absolutely not. He was rated as the 7th richest person in the world by Forbes magazine, with an estimated wealth at between $8 and $30 billion, not million, $1 billion.
And that's back in the 80s as well.
Exactly. And and I'd have no idea what that'd be worth at today's.
I think I read it's about 70 billion in today's money.
Wow.
Which is just insane.
How do you so back then when I'm guessing Escobar consumed your life if you're over there and your goal is to stop this man. How do you separate emotion from the job?
It's you know what, that's a good question. The emotion for me was when a young police officer lost his life. And believe me, there were many times that we would just, and this is after his escape, that we would just say, you know what, just let him surrender again. That way, people are not getting killed. But that emotion, when you see your friends getting killed, and you see the innocent people also. I mean, obviously, the car bombs, what did people have to do with that? Nothing. Just being at the wrong place at the wrong time, We saw kids, women. He didn't care. He was placing them wherever he could kill the most people. But the emotion sometimes is like, we need to make this go away. We need to make it stop. And one of them was, you know what? Let's just let him surrender and we all go home happy. Nobody gets hurt anymore. But that emotional side is very prevalent because you don't want to give up, basically. And that makes you stay in the fight. Just maybe that sounds a little corny, but you don't want to give up. You want to get him. You want to go after him. You don't want to make him win. You don't want to let him have his own way. And I said, where was justice in all this? Where's like I said, the victims of the Avianca flight, the victims of the DAS bombing? Where was justice to them? The victims of all the innocent people that were killed. And like I said, and one stat, and Steve and I came with it, that we basically put down, we put it on paper, but it was basically 10 to 15,000 people that Pablo Escobar had killed. We were way off. One of his sicarios, a guy by the name of Popeye, you've heard of John Jairo Velasquez Vasquez, his last remaining sicario, got out of prison about 5 years ago. One of his closest sicarios, basically Popeye himself, has said that Pablo Escobar had killed about 50,000 people, that we were way off on our numbers. 50,000 people. Then Popeye admitted to 300 people he killed himself. So this is not a human being. This people are savages. But the emotional side is, you got to stay in there. You do not give up. And like I said, and I'll be honest, remember that first time that he surrendered? I was in Medellin. I watched it. I had to watch it on television. It was an insult. It was, obviously, we did not like that deal. We were mad, because of all the victims, all the friends of ours that he killed. Like I said, Steve and I went to a funeral where we had 8 bodies, 8 coffins in the church of police officers that Pablo Escobar killed. So where was the justice to them? No, he got to surrender into his own prison. Wow, that was a big joke, but we could not do anything about it. But and if you look at that other side of the coin, is people were going to be saved. You know what? The car bombs went away. There was no more killings after he surrendered.
I mean, for context, for people, the prison that he ended up going to was nicknamed, was it La Catedral or La Cathedral? And it was essentially a country house that he was under arrest at, that he had kind of women come by and they play. I'm pretty sure they had a swimming pool. And as 2 enforcement officers who were chasing Pablo Escobar, when you know that he's living this life of luxury, how angry, maybe starting with you, Steve, how angry does that make you feel, I guess?
I don't know that Well, I guess angry would be a good word. When he surrendered, none of us were happy about it. We didn't know the level of luxury that he was living in at the prison because he wouldn't allow anyone to come in there. The good guys, the Colombian National Police, the Colombian military, the gringos, we weren't allowed within 2 miles of the perimeter of the prison. So we really didn't understand just how opulent it was until after he escaped. And the next day we go in there and see for ourselves what a joke it was. The fact that all these police officers are being killed, he put a bounty on police officers of $100 for a Colombian police officer's death. The fact that a man or a woman is brave enough to put on a uniform to go out and protect the innocents and their life is only worth $100, that shows you the depravity of his mind, that what he thought of law enforcement, what he thought of anybody that was trying to enforce the rule of law. Well, for Javier and I, as DEA agents, he put a $300,000 price tag on each of us. Wow. When you first hear that, it's not a real comforting feeling. But I think because I came into a very good situation because Javier had already been there for 3 years working with the Colombian National Police. And now I come in because I'm his partner. They accept me. I still have to earn their respect. But I was accepted immediately by them just simply because I was Javier's partner. Well, very quickly, you become close friends with these individuals. And I'll just tell you now, during that 18-month period from when he escaped until he died, there were 137 Colombian National Police officers that were murdered in an 18-month period in just one investigation. 137 cops were killed in one case. That's the heinous level. That's the violent level, the gruesome level that Pablo employed. And that's just police officers. Like Javier told you, over 50,000 people murdered. I remember we were in Bogota one time and we heard about a bombing down on 15th Street at this mall, in front of a mall. And the mall was the size of a city block. The front of it was all glass. And Pablo had set a bomb off down there to blow up a drugstore across the street that was owned by the Cali cartel. Well, it just happened to be a day when moms were down at the mall with their school-aged children buying supplies for the kids to go back to school. So when that bomb went off, now you've got millions and millions of shards of glass flying around everywhere. We go down there. As you're driving up, you see the smoke in the sky, so you know you're headed in the right direction. Well, eventually, because traffic was stopped, we stopped and got out and started walking in. You start hearing the cries and the noise associated with catastrophe and chaos. As you get closer, you start seeing body parts laying on the streets and on the sidewalks. And then eventually when we got up to the site, we saw, the iconic photographs of policemen and firemen carrying the lifeless bodies of babies and children who just simply were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, there were times when, especially there towards the end, maybe at month 15 or 16, when we're searching for him, where, like Javier said, we're just let him surrender. Let's, kind of get back to, let's get back to our job. My wife is back in Bogota by herself. In October of '93, we adopted our first daughter down there in Colombia, and we're up in Medellin living, so I'm not home with my wife or my new daughter. But then, you'd see they would bring in one of your colleagues, one of your Colombian police officer friends that had been murdered in an operation. And that's when you realize, hey, stop feeling sorry for yourself and get back to work here. Let's get focused back on the mission, and kind of put your self feelings, your feeling sorry for yourself feelings aside and do your job.
Was there ever a moment where you thought not is it worth it, because obviously it's worth it, but is this worth, as you say, you've got a wife and a new child at home. Was there ever a moment where you thought, I need to go home, I need to protect myself? Obviously, as an officer, your job and it's your job to do what you're doing, but did you ever want to give up?
No, not from that point. Well, not from that standpoint. And I'll tell you, my wife, if I had come across like that, she'd have slapped me. She's much braver than I ever thought of being. She, in the Narco series that shows that she took the baby and went back to Miami, that's not true. That's Hollywood. And when she read that, she got extremely upset about it and called the executive producer, Eric Newman, and blasted him about, I never left my husband down there. I stayed there the whole time. And she was really ticked off about that. Even to the point that when they released season 2 of Narcos, they invited Javier and I and our wives out to Hollywood. And, they wine you and dine you and limos and all that kind of stuff. It was very nice. But the night before the premiere, Eric and his wife invited us out to dinner there in Hollywood. And as we come walking in the restaurant, Eric and his wife are already there, and we come walking in, and Eric stands up, and he's looking at he's not looking at me and Javier, he's looking at Connie, my wife. He's going, Connie, are we good now? Are you going to hurt me? Are you going to beat me up over here? So, I worried about her, but I also knew how tough she was, that she understood what Javier and I were trying to accomplish. She understood the significance and the importance of us giving up our time and risking our lives to go work with the Colombian National Police for a just cause. So honestly, I really didn't worry about it. She'd go shopping by herself. We live close to one of the largest malls in Bogota, in the north part of the city there, called Unicentro. She'd walk over to the mall by herself. She wasn't afraid of anything.
She sounds like a strong lady. You've got a good one. Javier, how did it feel to see yourself depicted? How does it feel to meet the person who is you?
You know what? And Pedro Pascal, did a great job, and we were with him about a week. We took him to our DEA training academy where they learned how to be a DEA agents, and just a great human being, a great actor. He really captured the part, and in real life, I was single back in when I was in Colombia. I was not married, and that's why they had me chasing women and all sorts of sexy type stuff. And like I told people, hey, I wish that would have been real. It wasn't, Hey, believe me, I'm human being. And like I said, but he did a phenomenal job, and you know what? Kind of funny, when they called me, they said, hey, we didn't have anything to do with the selection of the actors. They just said, we're selecting Pedro Pascal for you, Javier. So I was like, I did not know who Pedro Pascal was. My wife now, had seen Game of Thrones, and she was like, hey, that's Prince Oberyn or Oberlin, whatever,
He's a cool guy.
You know what? And I wasn't telling a lot of people. Now I am. I still haven't watched the show, to be honest. I have not watched it. I've seen bits and pieces. I hear what other people say, but one of those days I'll watch it. Not now.
Wow. You're not curious at all?
I am. Of course I am. And it's, and especially when we go do our presentations. And our presentation is basically the rise and fall of Pablo Escobar. Steve and I have original photos, videos, and we show the audience who was Pablo Escobar, how he came up, how he got rich, how he got to be the, like I said, the inventor of narco terrorism, photos, videos. So we show that side, and because of the show, people who've watched it and do not know the real truth, they think I'm a dirty agent. They think I was on the take with Los Pepes, that I was killing people, the womanizing. Oh, that part hey, that's true, of course, But and my number one question is, Aaron, did you have all those affairs? So anyway,
I'll cross that off our notes list.
Anyway, that's but Pedro Pascal did a great job, and very personable, like you said, just outstanding actor.
Is there a part of it where, maybe kind of relating to you, Steve, assuming that you've kind of seen the show, obviously you're looking back at a portrayal of some harrowing stuff that you've had to kind of go through, and it's probably the same, I guess, when you're having to do these kind of interviews and stuff like that. How much, is there any things that really kind of still sticks with you? When you were talking about kind of like losing like friends and offers and stuff like that, Does that still stick with you kind of on the day-to-day now? And is that exacerbated when you kind of have to, I guess, tell people like us those stories?
It does not. I mean, I still feel for the families of the police officers and the innocent victims that died as a result of Pablo Escobar. But I also believe that God gave me the ability to deal with situations and not suffer from a mental, whether it's PTSD or shell shocked or whatever you want to call it. I've outside of Colombia, when I was a city cop, when I was a railroad cop, and in the DEA, was involved in a lot of shootings. And thank God I was never hit, but I was okay with all of them. I always felt like we were doing our job, that we were there for a purpose, and it was for the right purpose, that, it wasn't to glorify anybody. It was to try to help other people. The only time I ever suffered any, and I'm certainly not saying PTSD, but when my partner was shot, I was shell shocked a little bit. Basically because that was my best friend at the time. Partners are, it's hard to understand, but we're closer than brothers. So loud noises, for about 2 weeks, loud noises would startle me. I would physically jump. I might look for cover. And my wife recognized that. She was a registered nurse back then. And so she would purposely slam doors at home, which just, I'm hitting the floor looking for weapons and trying to get to a safe place. And the reason she did that was to show me that, hey, you're safe here. It's just a noise. And that, I didn't realize it at the time. I thought she was just messing with me. I thought she was screwing around with me, just being funny. But that's how I overcame that. Do I have that ability today? I doubt it very seriously that I do. But I just never suffered from that. I have watched the whole series. Connie and I both have together. I've tried to watch it a second time, and it doesn't bother me. It's just, honestly, I don't find it that interesting anymore. I don't know why. I know that sounds strange, but
Yeah.
a lot of people ask us how much of the show is true. And so every show that we do, that we've spoken at, we always have a question and answer session at the end, and people can ask us anything. And that's one of the most frequently asked questions, is how much of Narcos was true. And the first 2 seasons, which are about Pablo Escobar and Javier and I, we figure about a third of what you see is true. The second third, well, those events happen, but they're not depicted correctly. And then the last third, it's just straight out make-believe Hollywood. It shows I was kidnapped. I was never kidnapped. It shows that the Sicarios broke into our apartment and killed our cat and hung it on the front door. That didn't happen. The one thing that is true, though, is that Javier was a man-slut over there. He did have a lot of girlfriends.
You know what? Let me be honest. I was ordered by the United States government to have all this affair. So blame it on her. Nah, that's anyway.
I mean, Mansluts is a great sequel book, by the
way. And you know what? Talking about the stress, which is very important right now for, that stress is a problem, in my second time, because I got promoted like to the number 2 guy in Colombia back in 99, and I was involved in the Cali cartel search. And you know what? After it was about 2 years, and I had to request to leave Colombia because it was the stress had got to me. There was a campaign to discredit me that I was on the take, that I've been part of Los Pepes killing people. The coup d'etat was basically on a Sunday morning, where the ambassador, and God bless the ambassador, and I was very great lady, Ann Patterson, called me up. She was a career ambassador. Says, Javier, have you seen today's newspaper article? It was El Tiempo. And she says, if I was you, I'd go buy it. And it was basically headlines. Javier Peña was part of Los Pepes, killing innocent people. So then I started getting attacked by the media, by traffickers, that they had given me money. I was under investigation. I mean, it basically got to the point where I was, like I said, suffocating at nighttime, wake up choking, dying, so I couldn't take it. And that's when I requested, and I went back to the States. But it was a concerted effort. And it was, like I said, all lies. And I was in the press a lot during the second time. There was a famous general, great human being, hero, General Serrano, who was now in charge of the national police, and he knew me from my first time. So, I was always in the press with him, and that's when it started getting ugly as far as the attacks, and I had to leave.
I mean, for context as well, Los Pepes were, I mean, maybe you can explain this a bit better, but they were essentially kind of an anti-Pablo, kind of disgruntled sicarios.
Right. Los Pepes were you'll hear the word a lot, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. Basically, when Pablo killed two of his main traffickers, two of his main lieutenants, Moncada and Galliano, their head of security did not go to the prison. Pablo had ordered Moncada and Galliano to come by themselves. So now Don Berna is the head of security, and Pablo's trying to kill Don Berna. So Don Berna basically grabs about 20 other traffickers, and they're trying to kill Pablo Escobar's family. They were able to kill about 20 of Escobar's associates, and they would tie them up, torture them, and kill them. They were trying to find out who Pablo was, but they were sending a message to Pablo: "You're coming after us, we're coming after you, and we're going to beat." And they wanted to kill his wife, his kids, his mother. I said they killed about 30 of Escobar's friends, and they would put a placard in Los Pepes. And that was all being led by a guy by the name of Don Berna, who later on, and the accusations come in because Steve and I dealt with Don Berna. He was an informant for the police, unbeknownst to us that he was in charge of Los Pepes. After we leave Colombia, about, 2-3 years afterwards, Don Berna, he was a friend, he was an acquaintance, he was a source of information. He was an informant for the cops, and he was authorized to be an informant. That's when we find out he's a trafficker, and you know what? We, United States, we do the right thing. We put charges, and Don Berna gets extradited, and he's in the United States right now. He's towards the end of his sentence, but he got about 30 years.
This is kind of a tangent, but obviously after Escobar, the most prominent figure in that world is El Chapo Guzman. Were you ever asked for your help or understanding or knowledge on that case? Obviously, with you taking down Escobar.
What we told Steve and I mean, basically what we did what we did in going after Pablo Escobar, like I said, we formed a task force only devoted to Pablo Escobar. We used assets, intelligence only devoted to Pablo Escobar. So that was it was a learning lesson for DEA as to how we established going after an organization. And the Medellin cartel was dismantled from top to bottom to top. Everybody was dismantled. And basically, they modeled some of our task force strategies, for example, that exchange of intelligence right away, that reward for Pablo Escobar, $5 million. Basically, that was also copied in Mexico when they went after Chapo, using our same concept type building. But I never participated in the search for Chapo, and like I said, I'm not sure Steve may have in some indirect type way. So,
yeah, later in my career, I was assigned a special operations division and promoted up to what we call an assistant special agent charge. And in that position, they put me in charge of Central and South America. So, as a headquarters component, we're supporting our investigators out in the field throughout the United States, as well as foreign offices where we have DEA offices throughout the world. Chapo was one of the leaders back then, certainly somebody we were after. But there were, back then, the Arellano Felix organization in Tijuana was still prevalent. All the different cartels that were going on, Los Zetas were working their way up in prominence. So Chapo was just one of many people we were going after that time. But again, I'm not investigating him personally. We're supporting field elements in the investigations.
Yeah, but our concepts, like I said, when you go after, and this is what we talk about to the DEA, is whenever you're going after an organization, you got to target everybody. And it starts from as low as the guy who's supplying the gasoline for the airplanes, going after him, to the guy who's running the money operations, to the guy who's running the cellhead distribution networks in the United States and in Europe. And remember at this time when Pablo Escobar was sending cocaine to Europe, he was getting over $100,000 per kilo at the European markets. That's what they were paying at that time. So basically, our concept learned was you go after everybody. It done, could be just the guy who's providing surveillance out on the street. Everybody is attacked.
In the kind of, and you talk about Pablo having, selling lots of stuff to kind of Europe. I know that your tactic to kind of take down Pablo was to essentially chop the heads off many snakes to, chunk it up and take apart that to get to the root of the problem. Was there a moment in your investigation where you've chopped off so many heads of the snakes that you start to realize, oh, we've got him on the ropes? Maybe when Pablo was kind of going on the run.
Yeah. We noticed that after the escape, that's when Steve and I moved in. And we were part of that famous, you'll hear about it, it's called Bloque de Busca, search block, by us staying there. He was vulnerable at the beginning. Wow, we should have had him. We missed him. Then towards the end, and it's a perfect example that people are getting killed, people are getting arrested, and towards the end, and we're also seizing a lot of money. A lot of people do not realize that, but we are freezing accounts in the United States and in Colombia. We're reading financial offices in Colombia. I mean, and all this. He believed in cash, but towards the end, there was a lot of money in accounts, so we started seizing that. In arresting, and when I say killing, please do not, what I'm talking about when you say we kill sicarios, they would try to shoot us. So obviously,
Of course,
it was a firefight. But towards the end, the factor that we see is, when Steve is there, Pablo Escobar had one bodyguard left, right?
Wow.
At the beginning, hundreds, 500, 1,000 people supporting him, and because of the operation that we were doing, when you're ready, when you're killing, he was running. He had assets, but he did not have the cash, and if you look at the body, unkept, he's barefooted, and he's got one sicario left towards the end.
I mean, Steve, if you could step in and kind of explain. So, I mean, that, as Javier was alluding to, that last kind of chase for Pablo is on the kind of crimson rooftops of Medellin, and Search Block intercept essentially a phone call from Pablo's son, isn't it, that kind of lays the breadcrumbs and outs Pablo. Could you explain, I guess, that day and the chase and your feelings of what was going on?
Sure. And to say right at the beginning here, the Narco series shows that I was on the roof when Pablo was killed. That's not true. That's Hollywood. I was back at the base with Colonel Martinez, and I actually rode out from the base after Pablo was killed to the site. So back to base, the other gringos there, we had the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 there, which now referred to as the Development Group. We had the U.S. Army's Delta Force there with us. All those guys were there with us for 18 months. The best military operators in the world, but our orders from the embassy was that none of the gringos could leave the police base in Medellin. And a police base in Colombia is like a military base here in the United States, with your inner perimeters, your outer perimeters, the serpentine driveways, the concrete pillboxes with machine guns, things like that. Hogger and I were under those same orders, but we discussed it at the very beginning of the manhunt, and we just said we can't do our job if we can't go out. So we went out on operations almost every day. Now, everything that we did, we reported back to not only our bosses in DEA, but to the ambassador. The CIA got access to all of our information, and right back up to Washington. So everybody knew what we were doing, which was violating policies. Well, we admit we had violated policies, rules, and procedures every day by going out on operations. But the important part is we never violated the law. We were not criminals, regardless of what other people might say about us now. So as that operation is going, and the reason I point that out is because there's a lot of rumors out there that one of the American military operators, a sniper, is the one that killed Pablo. It's absolutely not true. The truth is, the reason I know that, the truth is they were in that room with me because I was over talking to them as this information started. And I'm standing in the doorway of this small room where they're all located, and I saw Colonel Martinez's executive staff rushing over to his office. So I told the guys, hey, something's going on, I'll be back. Well, I went over and Colonel Martinez motioned for me to come on in and listen, and he's talking on a handheld radio to Lieutenant Hugo Martinez, his son, who is the guy that's actually using radio directional finding equipment to find Pablo Escobar. And as Lieutenant is driving down the street with his equipment, he looks up and he sees Pablo Escobar looking out the window talking on the phone. So, of course, he reports, I got visual confirmation that yes, this is Pablo. So the colonel tells him, we're loading up the troops now, come out there, whatever you do, don't let him get away. Because this has been excruciating that we're still going through this after 18 months. I mean, it was somewhat of an embarrassment to the Colombian government that we hadn't been able to capture him yet. Well, the unit that was out there with the lieutenant was the DEA unit, and it's the group that Javier and I had been working with all these years, had been living with at the barracks, at the base, that, we'd eat with, we'd go out on operations with, all the different things. And they weren't going to wait for us to load up 600 people to come out there and get Pablo Escobar. So they went ahead and initiated the operation. They're the ones that encountered Pablo in the firefight. And basically, Pablo took on the wrong people that day, and it cost him his life for doing so. After Pablo is dead is when I rode out to the site with Colonel Martinez. It just so happened that I had the only camera that worked that day, so that's why we have all the photographs. There's one in particular there's one theory out there that Pablo's son, Juan Pablo, is trying to promote now that his dad was not killed by the Colombian National Police, that he committed suicide. That's it's a bald-faced lie. There's absolutely no truth in that statement whatsoever, and here's how I know. Before, when I was a uniformed police officer, I've worked suicides and I've worked murder cases. When you fire a weapon, when the bullet comes out the end of the barrel, there are little bits of gunpowder that will follow the bullet out. And they'll travel a certain distance till they lose their velocity and they'll fall to the ground. Well, Pablo was shot 3 times, once in the back of the leg, once in the butt, and the kill shot was in his ear, right through the right ear. If you could hold a pistol, and Pablo had 2 9mm pistols that day, if you could hold a pistol out, even at arm's length, it's almost impossible to get that gun turned around and be able to shoot yourself precisely in the ear to commit suicide. But even if you could, that gunpowder that follows the bullet out will travel that far, and it leaves what we call gunpowder residue. It leaves little burn marks in the skin. So there would be little black dots around his right ear. Anybody can go look at the pictures online. There's an up-close shot of his right ear where the bullet entered his head. Look and see if you see any marks on there, because I'm telling you, they're not. That's how we know he did not commit suicide. Now, why would his son say that? Well, you know what? If my dad was Pablo Escobar, I might want to change that legacy a little bit myself.
Pride.
But again, it's not more than a lie.
You talk about the kind of photos. There's one specific photo of you essentially holding Pablo like you're a big game hunter almost. What do you think when you that must get brought up a lot. What do you think when you look back at that photo?
It's not something I'm overly proud of. And what happened was, once I got on the roof where the police officers were, the DEA guys that had actually engaged Pablo in his last firefight, they're all excited. The excitement level is a lot of backslapping, shaking hands, high-fiving. I mean, we're just all elated that Pablo is finally dead, because we knew everybody was safer in the country because he was no longer walking around on the face of the earth. And so the officers are like, hey, my nickname was Steek. They had a hard time saying my name Steve in Colombia, so and everybody had a street name. So they're like, Steek, take my picture. And they wanted their pictures, and so I was. And then they're like, come and get in the picture with us. And so I just went and joined them. When that picture hit Washington, I caught a little grief over that. just for that same reason, because they weren't happy that a DEA agent was there. And it probably wasn't the smartest thing, because Javier and I, we wanted the Colombian National Police to have the credit for this investigation. And even to this day, every audience we speak to, we make the statement at the end of the presentation, if you forget everything else we've said today, here's your takeaway. Who are the true heroes of this operation that took down Pablo Escobar? It's not the gringos. It's not Javier and Steve. It's not DEA. It's not the United States government. It's the Colombian National Police, because they took their country back from that guy.
This might be a silly question, but obviously that day you killed him. Was that the goal? Was the aim to kill him, or with getting him alive, would that have been a better outcome?
The aim was to dismantle Pablo Escobar, no matter what. As I said, all the resources. It was, and if it had to kill him, hey, you know what? I mean, and like I tell people, we don't kill people just for the sake, but these people were coming out with guns, and we knew Pablo Escobar was not going to surrender. We knew that, so any method that was out there was going to be used to stop him.
Would that have satisfied you? Did that satisfy you more than him facing justice, though? I'm going to say satisfy. I mean, was that the preferred outcome?
Well, obviously, that's a tough question. I mean, obviously, you know what? We wanted him to serve time in the United States in a real prison cell, and that's what he was fighting about. But we knew he was not going to let himself be taken. And like I said, all means were used to stop Pablo Escobar. And like I said, we knew that second time he was not going to surrender peacefully. It was going to be a fight. And as you saw, it was a fight towards the end. And he lost, And you know what? And I want to say that Colonel Hugo Martinez Poveda, is a real hero. He's the one. Steve mentioned his name, and I also mentioned the General Octavio Vargas Silva, as being the architect. He never gave up on, like I said, looking for Pablo Escobar, all his efforts. And like I said, these two Colombian heroes deserve all the credit.
You mentioned kind of earlier, Javier, about obviously that final photo of Pablo being unkempt, and he looks quite a bit bigger, and he's hairier, and he's kind of, got no shoes on. Obviously, we talked about the kind of cult of personality of Pablo. Was there a real disintegration of that kind of cult of personality as he was on the run, kind of not as much in the public eye, or was there still this kind of mythology about him?
Yes, the mythology at the beginning, when Pablo Escobar was in full force. I mean, he had hundreds of bodyguards. I remember the stories. They would go into restaurants, they would close them down, bodyguards. People could not leave. He'd end up paying their bills. It was just larger than life persona. And if you look, because of the law enforcement efforts in going after everybody in the organization, towards the end, people were running. He was disorganized. And there was another major killing towards the end that had a lot of effect on Pablo Escobar, the killing of a guy named Mario Chopo. Chopo was the guy who was coordinating all the terrorism. Basically, that was his right-hand man. When Chopo was killed, also in a shootout, the police encountered him at a hotel. That guy went down shooting. He lost. I mean, you started seeing the crumbling of the Medellin cartel. And then, like I said, when we started arresting all his financial people, taking his money, towards the end, you started seeing him vulnerable, running, and he is so scared. And basically, also Los Pepes had a lot to do with it. His family, he was trying to get him out of Colombia. He was trying to send him to Miami, which we did not let that happen. Then he sent him to Germany, which I'm glad the German authorities turned him back, and that's led to his downfall. So he was very, like I said, he wasn't the Pablo Escobar that we were dealing with in the beginning. He was basically broke, out of people. People were turning against him. People, I mean, the $5 million reward, a lot of people were calling in on information on Pablo Escobar. So what I'm trying to say is all that effort led by the Colombian forces, with the U.S. help, I mean, that made a difference in that he was towards the end, and it proved.
So, I mean, when we last spoke, however many years ago that was, there was a quote that stood out to me that was that, I think, Steve, you said that Pablo was basically psychopathic and homicidal with how many people he kind of killed. And it's worth kind of emphasizing the phrase narco-terrorist and that terrorist part. I mean, people gloss over how many people Pablo killed because he trafficked loads of drugs, but I mean, he was a terrorist at the end of the day. Those kind of psychopathic tendencies, I guess, do you think that grew as a result of him gaining more power, and it kind of almost corrupted him, and he was willing to kind of make people expendable? Or do you think that was something that was inside Pablo from the start, and from kind of your early operations into him?
Well, I think that was probably ingrained in him at an early age. He grew up very poor. His mom was a school teacher. His dad was a dirt farmer. He didn't want to get a regular job. He started out stealing hubcaps off of cars and stealing gravestones out of cemeteries, and then sandblasting the names off and reselling those to the companies. Real honorable profession. Then he started smuggling other, like what we call black market goods out of Bolivia and Peru into Colombia and other countries. But then, the story is that he was employed by a guy named Restrepo to help facilitate a 17-kilo cocaine deal in Colombia. And it went, and Pablo saw how much money could be made. So what did he do? He went out and killed Restrepo, took over the market, and he just continued to grow and grow and grow. So there's, the psychopathic part of him, or the sociopathic part of him, where he has no guilt feelings, no remorse, no compunction about killing another human being to further his own ends, his own means. That's what made him successful. He, and as you're more and more successful and not getting caught, well, it becomes easier and easier, right? And I believe that's what happened. Now, a lot of people will try to tell us, well, if Escobar if he had started a legal business, he would have been just as rich and just as successful. That's not true. His business plan is, I tell you, Harry and Carl, to do something. If you don't do it, I go kill your family. I'll kill your dog, and then I'll kill you. That's not going to work in a legitimate business, is it? Nope. So I mean, I can't imagine. I don't understand that criminal mindset that you can kill somebody for your own personal gain and not feel bad about it. I just don't understand it completely. And I think that's what separates us between the good guys and the bad guys, that thin blue line that you hear about in law enforcement. And let me tell you, there's a lot of police officers that, including me, that could have gone on the left side of that thin blue line rather than on the right side. But, in the end, on my podcast, I have a guest on every show, just like you do. Most of them are good guys or former good guys. And one of the questions I like to ask is, why did you go into law enforcement to start with? Why did you go in the military to start with? They went in to help people. They didn't go in to kill people. I haven't met a single cop anywhere in the world yet that said, I became a policeman because I wanted to kill other people. That's just not true. That's what certain elements in the world would like to say to besmirch law enforcement and all the good that they do. But I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. There's, we're coming to the end now. There's one question that I had that I really wanted to ask, and it brings about a kind of nice full circle, because you talked about the camaraderie of you two as partners, and the fact that you were closer than brothers, or are closer than brothers. Was there ever a moment, kind of stress-induced, during your time in Colombia where the two of you maybe had a falling out or came to butt heads at any point?
None whatsoever. That's the funny part about Narcos. it shows that Javier and I were shoving each other and pushing each other and yelling and screaming. We've never even had a disagreement. We've never had an argument. And another funny part is they show in the Narco series, whenever they encounter one of the actors that plays us, the first thing you do is pull out a cigarette and light it. Neither one of us even smoked. It was we didn't have alcohol in our offices. We had plenty of alcohol at home, but certainly not in the offices where having a bad day and you pull out and have a drink. That's just simply not true.
One of the funniest comments, it was one of my police officers called after the show, says, "Oh, yeah, man, you're in the morning, man. You've already killed a couple of people. You've had sex with a couple of women. You're smoking, and then you go to lunch, man."
It's a busy morning.
It is a good morning.
Yeah.
It's a busy morning. That's what he said.
And we appreciate you allowing us to tell you what's true and not true. And here's why: because we've done 2 speaking tours throughout the United Kingdom, through Scotland, England, and Ireland. And as I mentioned, we always have a Q&A at the end where people can ask us anything. And my grandmother on my mom's side immigrated from England to the United States when she was a little girl, so I have direct ties back. She's from Essex. So I have direct ties back to England, and this is certainly not a disparaging remark, but every Q&A we do, every audience thinks everything they saw on Narcos is true. So they challenge with some unbelievable questions, and especially Javier. They're like, you're a dirty guy. You were passing classified information to Los Pepis. Why are you not in prison? So, for your audience there, you just remember it's Hollywood. It's not 100% the truth.
Do you ever get kind of like letters from people? I guess obviously you do your speaking tours, but are there ever any people that are angry at you both, either from the show or just from your work in general, that kind of send you correspondence?
Yeah, on social media, we haven't received any in a while, but we've gotten a lot of hate mail through social media. People, wishing that my children would develop cancer and die a slow, painful death, or they'd like to cut our heads off and crap down our throats, and just a lot of accusatory messages. But here's the thing: I'll bet you, well, first of all, none of them have the guts to say that to our face. Second of all, I'm pretty sure that those people that are sending us those messages weren't even alive when Pablo was in power. So they really have no firsthand knowledge. They've just, it's a myth that they like to subscribe to. Almost every audience we speak to, there is a Colombian in the audience that will wait for us. I mean, at different parts of the world, we've been in Asia, all over Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all over the United States, Canada, all the different places we've been, and they will wait. And when we meet them, they thank us because maybe they don't remember, but their parents had to leave Colombia because of what Escobar was doing. And tell them the story, Javier, about Rodrigo Lara Bonilla's family.
Yeah, after we did our presentation, and basically, the rights don't follow Pablo Escobar. It was in Switzerland, right, Steve?
Norway.
No, Norway, yeah. Anyway, and afterwards, they tell us there's a Colombian in the audience. After we finished, she wants to talk to y'all. So we said, of course, and it happened that he was the nephew of Attorney General Lara Bonilla, who was killed by Pablo Escobar in Bogota. He was the Attorney General for Colombia, and he was taking a stance that Pablo Escobar should be extradited to the United States. So this young man now in his 30s, he said he was a baby when it happened. Obviously, he don't remember, but the orders from Pablo Escobar were to kill all of the Lara Bonilla family members, all of them. Not one was to be alive. So 30 family members had to leave Colombia, and this young person now grew up in Switzerland and doesn't even speak Spanish, but that's his history now. They had to leave Colombia because of Pablo Escobar was going to kill them all, and he did kill his uncle, Lara Bonilla, the Attorney General of Colombia.
Wow. I mean, there's still a kind of, and I think it's a great thing to kind of end on, that there's still a kind of presence in the world where Pablo Escobar's still kind of glorified in this kind of cool way. I know people will
Absolutely,
wear merchandise of kind of Pablo Escobar and stuff like that. I guess if we gave you the soapbox now, if you could speak to people who kind of maybe slightly glorify or without even realizing glorify Pablo Escobar, if you could summarize Pablo Escobar and tell them the truth, what would you say to them?
You know what? Pablo Escobar killed 50,000 innocent people. Should that person be glorified? Of course not. Pablo Escobar did not care. There's a great conversation that I listened to him where he's telling his wife how much he loves her. In the background, you hear a guy yelling. Covers the phone. It says, cover his mouth. In other words, they're torturing a guy they have while at the same time he's telling his wife how much he loves her. So what about all those innocent people, the Avianca people, the 109 Avianca people, the 120,000 people? What about, like I said, all the innocent people happen to be at the wrong time, at the wrong place? So are you going to forgive him for that? I hope not.
For me, I would say go look at the facts. Don't believe what other people are telling you. And this is not just about Escobar. This is true with anything, especially in our country right now. Don't listen to the media. Find out what the news is and then do your own research and you make up your mind. Don't let others tell you what to think. So we present this to all our audiences, and this is what you'll find if you do your research. In 1992 and 1993, Medellin, Colombia was the most dangerous place on the planet. Had the highest murder rate for 2 years. That's how dangerous it was. What we did is, prior to Pablo's death, we looked at the murder rate in Medellin, Colombia, and then a few months after his death, we checked the murder rate again. What we found, and what you'll find if you do the research, is that the murder rate in Medellin had dropped by almost 80%, simply because one man is gone. Now, how do you justify? That's facts. That's not the United States government making up propaganda. That's not Javier Steve making up stories here. Do your own research and you find out the truth, and then you decide what you believe. Even if you still believe that he was a good guy, how do you justify what Javier just said, that 50,000 people, innocent people, were murdered simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time? If that's what you're thinking still, you need to go get some professional help.
Absolutely. Honestly, I think it's the most poignant message to kind of end on. Stephen, Harry, thank you so much for your time. Please do plug, obviously, Manhunters, How We Took Down Pablo Escobar is available, the book. Are you able to plug your podcast, Steve, as well? Tell people where to go to see it.
Absolutely. The podcast is Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Javier comes on as a guest host occasionally. It's a weekly podcast, been going for about 3.5 years now. You can find it on YouTube, the videos, and any place you listen to podcasts, audio. But also, as far as our book, it's available on eBay for those of you in the UK or parts of Europe. And Javier and I actually ship those books out ourselves when we get the orders in. I just got some eBay orders in this morning.
Wow.
The books are autographed, and you can, when you order it, you can put, if you want us to include a personal note in there, we're happy to do that. And we hope to come back to the UK sometime again on our speaking tour. We have a blast every time we come over there. You guys are a ton of fun to hang out with. So we're hoping to see you again maybe in 2025.
Well, I mean, if you come to Liverpool, we owe you a pint.
Yeah, we get you a couple of beers. Don't worry.
I mean, I personally, just lastly, I want to.
Yeah, it'll be double for me. Steve doesn't drink, but I drink for him. So
okay, 2 for you, Javier.
I'll get you a Coke. Not that kind of Coke. And what I do want to say though is, I mean, like, on a personal message, I mean, like, it was about 5 years ago that I was like 18 or something, 19 maybe, interviewed you both, and I wouldn't be sat here doing this with, you know, a nice little studio or doing the journalism that I've kind of gone on to do without, you know, used to giving me the chance when I was like, I mean, I listened back to it like I was a bumbling kind of the 19-year-old lad who was very nervous. So yeah, once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for, I guess, giving me the platform to, I don't know, like, continue on my career. So thank you.
It's our pleasure. We're proud of what you've accomplished over the years. So keep it up.
Yeah.
He's a talented
We
boy.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
All the best. I have such deep love for those guys. It's like